Alrighty, well, it's still morning time here at Camp Crazy. Mm-hmm. No. Boop, boop, boop. Itchy nose from all the cat fur and stuff. Anyway, I'm having a moment with my Rocky here. Oh, I got some butter tart on my face, I see. I was eating a butter tart. And I got some of the flaky pastry on my face. I did. Oh, there he is. All right. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a story about Rocky when Rocky was just a kitten. And it's kind of a neat story. Rocky has always been very smart. He has been exceptionally smart. Anyway, when he was just a kitten, I still had my apartment above the Royal Bank in Perth, Ontario. And got his whiskers in my mouth there. Still had my apartment there. And in the living room, of course, I had the couch. I also had a chair. And I had a filing cabinet. Too, I had a bunch of furniture, but that's just free of the furniture items I had in my living room. Anyway, what did Rocky do? Rocky was on my lap, getting a nice rub like he is now. And he decided he was going to jump from my lap to the top of the chair, which was quite a jump. But he did it. He jumped from my lap to the top of the chair, which was beside the couch. Now, behind the chair was the filing cabinet. So what did Rocky do? Rocky decided he would jump from the top of the chair onto the filing cabinet. Anyway, he's going to jump up onto the top of the filing cabinet. Well, he was on the chair, on the top of the chair, and he would get ready to jump, and he'd hunker down, and he'd just be getting ready, and then he looked over in my direction. And I kind of pretended I couldn't see him. I could see him out the corner of my eye, but I wasn't looking directly at him. And I pretended like I couldn't see him. So he looked at me. He saw that he thought I wasn't watching him. I made a big fuss over him when he jumped from my lap to the top of the chair. I told him what a great jumper he is and made a fuss over him. So then when he wanted to jump from the top of the chair to the top of the filing cabinet, I acted like I wasn't watching him, even though I was. And he'd get ready, he'd be getting ready to jump. He'd get hunkered down and just all primed up to jump. And then he'd look, and he thought I couldn't see him. And so he looked over, and then what I would do is I'd turn and look at him when he'd look over. So then he'd get ready to jump, and I'd turn my head and look away again. But I could still see him with my peripheral vision, but I don't think he knew that. Anyway, so then he'd be getting ready to jump, and he'd look and see that I wasn't watching, and he'd stop. And we went through this cycle of him getting ready to jump and me looking away from him before he did it 3 times. And the 3rd time, he turned and looked at me, and he went, "Rah!" Just like that, So then I turned and looked at him, and he made the jump from the top of the chair to the filing cabinet. But I made a fuss over him. I told him he was a really good jumper. But, yeah, that's how smart he was, even as a kitten, anyway. Very smart cat, Anyway, he wanted me to watch him jump, and he thought I wasn't watching, and he got impatient, finally go, "Rah!" like that, So then I turned and looked, and he jumped. But he got frustrated as he wanted me to see him jump. There's a bunch of things that he did. His sister Muella disappeared one time in the apartment this was still. And I was in the living room. I wondered where she'd gone. And just jokingly, I didn't really think anything would come of it. I said to Rocky, "Do you know where Moo went?" I'm looking for Moo. I said, do you know where Moo went? And Rocky, he goes, meow, like that. He looks up at me and did that, and he ran into the kitchen. And then he came back out of the kitchen and he meowed at me again and turned and went back in. I thought, okay, he wants me to follow him. So I followed him. And we went through the kitchen and into my bedroom, which was off the kitchen. And he went and he sat down beside my bed on the floor. And he kept turning his head and looking towards the bed. Like he was sitting there where the covers came down to the floor, beside the bed. And he sat down there and he kept looking to his side, looking at the bed, and then looking up at me and looking at the bed again. And so I went over and I lifted up the covers that were hanging down to the floor, right beside where he was sitting. And there was Muella. She was sitting there on the other side of the covers, like on the other side of the curtain, basically, or the covers, under the bed. Yeah. So that was another thing that he did anyway. And there was another time we were in a heat wave, a really nasty heat wave, and we didn't have an air conditioner. And it'd get really hot up there in the summertime, You get very uncomfortable up there in the summertime. Anyway, I was in Ottawa, and I stopped in the city of Ottawa, and I stopped at a Salvation Army store. And outside the store, okay, Rocky. And outside the store, itchy from the cat fur. And outside the store was this air conditioner just sitting outside the door. And it said free. It said it works and it's free to anyone who wants it. So I thought, well, I'll take it home. So I loaded it into the car and I took it home. I thought the price was right. Now, because none of the outlets in the bedroom were rated at where you could actually plug something like an air conditioner in, the only outlets in the apartment that I could plug an air conditioner into really would be the ones in the kitchen over the kitchen counter. There was a couple of outlets over the kitchen counter I could plug something like that into. So I had to buy like a 12 gauge extension cord, and that ended up costing me $50. It probably cost $150 now. This was years ago and everything's gone up so much. But anyway, so it wasn't entirely free. It did cost me $50 for the extension cord. But then I would have had to buy an extension cord anyway on top of buying an air conditioner if I bought an air conditioner. So it was an older air conditioner anyway, but it worked really well. So that night I brought Rocky and Muella into my bedroom and I closed the door. I brought their litter box and their food and their water in there too. And we all slept in my bedroom in air-conditioned comfort. It was the first good night's sleep we had had in a long time. Anyway, the next day, I was going over to a friend of mine who was a mechanic and used to do some work in his shop at his house. He was kind of semi-retired, and I used to help him with his work, with the cars. I went over to his place, and I was helping him fix a car. And at lunchtime, I came home because there was a tool actually there that I needed. There was a certain tool that I needed when we were doing this job anyway. So I came home because he had one of them, but he didn't have two of them, and we needed, for each of us to do what we were doing, we each needed one of these tools. So I came home anyway, and I got this tool. I can't just remember exactly what it was now. But when I came home, of course, Rocky meets me at the door, him and Muella both. And he runs into the kitchen, and I follow him. And he's standing there in the kitchen, and he's looking up at where the air conditioner's plugged in above the kitchen counter. And he'd look up at where it was plugged in, and then he'd turn and look at me and meow, and then look back up at where it was plugged in. And then he ran into the bedroom and he jumped up on the windowsill. It was an old stone building, so it had wide windowsills. jumped up on the windowsill beside the air conditioner, and he turned and he looked at me and meowed, and then he took his paw and he tapped at the control panel with his paw, and he turned and looked at me and meowed again. Oh, anyway, my neck's sore. Anyway, he wanted me to turn on the air conditioner. That's what it was. I turned it off when I left that morning, and he wanted me to turn it on. So that's what it was anyway. He wanted me to turn on the air conditioner. It was a stinking hot day, and that's what he wanted. So he was letting me know he wanted me to turn on the air conditioner. There was another time when I was coming back from Ottawa. I stopped in a little town called Richmond, a little village just outside of Ottawa. And they had a chip wagon there, a pretty good chip wagon. There's kind of a story with that chip wagon. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But the owners of the chip wagon, there's a man and a woman, a married couple, an older married couple. The owners of the chip wagon, they used to sell big sacks of apples. They were supposed to be for deer hunting, to bait deer or whatever. But most of the apples were really good. And for like $7, I could get like a grain sack full of apples. And there was nothing wrong with 90% of them were really good. So I bought one of these sacks of apples for $7. And I kept a bunch for myself, but I also put a bunch in the plastic shopping bags and distributed them to people I knew that were different people that were having a rough go of it, that needed, I got a burn in my sweater. I do. That'd be from the fire, from the fire yesterday when I was burning the brush. That happens, your clothes get all burned up when you're doing a bonfire, burning brush. So that's what that is. But anyway, when I was working yesterday, I was burning a bunch of brush. But anyway, so I emptied the sack out into plastic shopping bags to divide up these apples amongst different people I knew that, single mothers and people like that, that I knew. Anyway, here I was anyway, dividing up these apples. So I had this sack, and I know cats like to play with stuff like that. So I put the sack down on the floor for Rocky and Muella. Well, my kitchen was a long, narrow kitchen. It was a long, narrow room anyway. And what did Rocky and Muella do? But they got into this thing where they would take a run, and they'd jump onto the bag, and they'd slide on the bag to the far end of the kitchen. Eventually, the wall would stop them on the other end of the kitchen. So, like, Rocky would take a run and jump on the bag and slide to the far end of the kitchen. And then he'd get off the bag, and he'd take it in his teeth, and he'd drag it back to where it started so that Muella then could have a turn. And she'd take a run and jump on the bag and slide to the other end of the kitchen. And then when the wall stopped her, she'd get off it and grab it with her teeth and pull it back again. And then Rocky would take a turn. And they did this for a long time. Just like a couple of little kids, But, yeah, some pretty funny stuff anyway. I mean, but very smart. Very, very smart anyway. There are so many things like that. There was one time I made a roasted chicken with the potatoes and the carrots and everything in a roasting pan. And so I fixed a plate up for myself of this chicken. And I'm sitting in the living room eating my meal. It was quite good. And of course, Rocky and Muella were there looking for some chicken. So I'd throw some chicken down on the floor for Rocky, and I'd throw some down for Muella. And Moo would just eat hers right there. But what Rocky was doing is Rocky was taking his chicken into the kitchen. Well, some animals are like that. I thought, well, maybe he just doesn't want to eat in front of us or something. I don't know. Taking his his cat fur, taking his food into the kitchen to eat it, because we were in the living room. Well, but what I noticed is he was coming right back. He'd go into the kitchen and he'd be right back out again looking for more. Muella would still be eating the stuff I gave her, and Rocky'd be looking for more. So I'd throw more down on the floor for him, and away he'd go with it into the kitchen. This happened several times. And I got to thinking, he can't possibly be eating his chicken in the time that he's away, before he's back looking for more. So I went into the kitchen to see what was going on, and here he had made a stockpile of chicken. He had figured out by not eating it right away, he could get more. You see, he was running a con on me is what he was doing. But that's how smart he is anyway. He's very clever. He really is. There was another time, too, I had this clothes dryer. It was just an apartment-sized clothes dryer. I had bought it and an apartment-sized washing machine from a neighbor in the building. And I kind of got screwed on the deal because the washing machine leaked. So I couldn't use it. But the dryer at least worked. But still, I wasn't too happy about that, to have a neighbor take advantage of me like that. But that's what happened anyway. And I don't know why, when he demonstrated the machine to me, it didn't leak. But then all he did was run it through the cycles really quick. It wasn't running for very long or anything. It's not like he actually did a load of clothes in it. And when it leaked, it was actually would leak when it was draining. Anyway, I had a look at it, and it turns out the drain pump or whatever, it was broken. Like where the hose would fit onto the drain pump, it was all cracked. The housing of the pump was cracked and stuff. It was an awful mess. I probably could have repaired it with JB Weld or something, but I just got rid of the machine. I just scrapped the machine in the end, because I couldn't afford to have a flood up there, So, it would have got me into a lot of trouble. So, anyway, one day, Rocky, he's laid down in front of my dryer, and he'd stick his paw in just a little bit. He'd only get his paw in a little bit, but he'd stick it in a little bit, and he'd look up at me and meow. And I thought, well, maybe he's got a mouse cornered under there or something. So I took a flashlight, and I looked underneath the dryer. It turns out his toys were under there. He had managed to knock a bunch of his toys, his little toy mice and springs and things like that, in under the washing machine, and under the dryer, I mean. And that's what it was. He wanted his toys. So I went and I got a stick, and I stuck it under there, and I just did a swipe under there and managed to get all his toys out from under the dryer. So then he was pretty happy. He was playing with his toys. Look at him there. He's quite a cat. He's half asleep. But anyway, that's how smart he is, though. He communicates with me all the time. He can't speak like the way a person might speak, but he lets me know what's going on, and he lets me know what he wants to. If he wants something, I'll know about it for sure. Animals do talk to us. We just have to know how to listen to them, that's all. Anyway, there's some stories about Rocky, about how smart he is and so on. He's very clever. But I'm sure there's other stuff too, but I'm not thinking of at the moment. But yeah, he's very smart anyway. We'll talk to you all later.